Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up, the frontrunner in the Democratic presidential primary is someone who literally praised the murderous communist Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Now, even after being called out for his comments, Bernie Sanders continued to stand by them. I'll explain just how much of an impact this could have on his campaign in a moment. Up next, this week's Democratic primary debate was a complete disaster. Candidates were practically jumping over each other to stumble again and talk about how much more free stuff they would give the American people using, of course, your tax dollars. Find out what happened in South Carolina in just a second. And finally, the coronavirus is spreading further, and the CDC actually came out with a warning for all Americans. Now, to make all of this worse, liberals are literally using the coronavirus as a political weapon to try and attack President Donald Trump. All of this and more coming up. But first, a quick reminder to please share this video with your friends on social media. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. Bernie Sanders is legitimately the frontrunner for the Democratic Party. Now, as he leads the party, he is also praising the regime of the late Cuban dictator Fidel Castro. That's right, Sanders praised a regime that murdered and jailed anyone that disagreed with its policy of complete control. Now, even today, it is an authoritarian regime that oppresses its people and stifles free speech. Now, regardless of all of these facts, Sanders still decided it was a good decision to praise Castro's use of a literacy program to legitimize him. Just one problem with that. It is important to note that the historical context of this literacy program was specifically designed and used to increase the number of people in Cuba that would be able to read the propaganda of Castro's regime. Yeah, that's right. That is what he's now saying legitimizes Castro as some sort of good man. You think I'm joking? Watch Bernie Sanders double down on this clip from CBS's 60 Minutes.
It's unfair to simply say everything is bad. You know, when Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing?
Now, let's be very clear about what you just heard. This wasn't a clip from 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or as old as Bernie is, 30 years ago when he was still a declared socialist. What he just said happened this week. Now, this is from the frontrunner for the liberals in the Democratic Party, and he's praising a communist dictator who killed thousands. Now, many are questioning if it could cause Sanders to lose the state of Florida come Super Tuesday. Even freshman Representative Donna Shalala, a liberal from Florida, flat out said that Sanders' praise for Castro is, quote, unacceptable. Take a look at what she had to say in this interview on Fox News.
He hasn't been down here to talk to residents to understand how our community, not just the Cuban community, but the Venezuelan community, the Nicaraguan community, feel about socialism and about communism.
So you think he made a mistake?
He made more than a mistake. It's what he believes, and it's unacceptable to our community.
Now, Bernie Sanders is still not budging on his position on Castro, and recent polling is now showing that he's actually falling behind his rivals in Florida, an important state for anybody running for the White House. Now, Sanders is still not backing down even after he's been questioned by multiple people in the media. Perfect example in an interview following the debate in South Carolina. He was reminded that Representative Shalala actually invited him to come visit the people in her district and hear what they have to say about Cuba and what the government has done to the Cuban people. So how did Bernie respond? He doubled down and continued to praise the Cuban dictator. Take a look at this from CBS.
Congresswoman Donna Shalala said, come on down to Miami and meet with the people who have been affected by his regime. Would you be willing to do that and hear them out?
I go all over the country, of course. Cuba is a dictatorship. I've said that 8 million times. But that does not mean to say, as Obama pointed out, that even under a dictatorship, you could teach people to read and to write, that you could provide health care to all people.
The Florida Democratic Party has also issued a statement without naming Sanders that broadly condemned dictatorships and called for candidates to, quote, understand our immigrant community's shared stories. Now, Sanders isn't helping himself along the way. He refused to give the real cost of his Medicare for All plan, as well as all of his other plans that would cost trillions of dollars. In fact, during this week's debate, Sanders actually denied the fact that his plans would cost trillions of dollars to the American taxpayers because it's easier to say it's all going to be free. He literally said that it would cost only about $45 billion for Medicare for all. Well, that is a complete lie. You don't believe me? Take a look at this from CBS.
What the Health and Human Services have said in analyzing healthcare costs, what recent Yale study has said is that your program would cost some $50 trillion over a 10-year period. We would continue to pay, in some cases, 10 times more for the same exact prescription drugs. What every study out there, conservative or progressive, says, Medicare for all will save money. Ours will cost about $45 billion, not $60 trillion.
No,
Now, Sanders is flat out socialist, and if he makes his way into the White House, he will take down our entire country. The worst part about all of this is that the liberals won't condemn him for these comments. Yes, Sanders is the front runner. You may ask why? Well, because the Democrats honestly tried to steal the election from him back in 2016 when they were all in for Hillary Clinton, even giving her questions that she would have in advance before she debated Bernie Sanders. Even the liberals are terrified, however, of Bernie Sanders, and, well, now they're worried that he is going to actually take down their entire campaign. I'm fine with that, so he's not able to take down America. This is exactly why we have to be vigilant and make sure our president gets back in the White House in 2020, with even a bigger win than he got in 2016. The Democratic presidential debate was nothing less than another complete and utter dumpster fire. In fact, it would be rude to dumpster fires to call the debate a dumpster fire. It was so bad. To give you an idea of just how terrible it was, I'm going to show you one of the many moments where the candidates wasted time trying to yell over each other like a bunch of school kids. But don't worry, they did it in a classy way. They all had their hand in the air virtually the entire night. Take a look at this from CBS.
First of all, let me go. Tom, I think she was talking about my plan, not yours.
I think we were talking about math, and it doesn't take 2 hours to do the math. Because let's talk about what it adds up to. Let's talk about math indeed. Okay, so here's the math. No, here's the math.
Can I respond?
Doing nothing is what will happen.
Senator Sanders, you're allowed a quick response, and we would like to allow the other candidates.
Moderator,
Senator Sanders.
Now, one of the most awkward yet truthful moments of the night came when Mayor Pete flat out stated one of the party's biggest issues in this election cycle. The top 7 candidates for the Democratic nomination are all white people. That's right. Take a look at this from the CBS debate.
And I'm not here to score points. I come at this with a great deal of humility because we have had a lot of issues, especially when it comes to racial justice and policing in my own community. And I come to this with some humility because I'm conscious of the fact that there's 7 white people on this stage talking about racial justice.
Now, I have no idea why Mayor Pete thought it was a good idea to point out to the entire country that there's only a bunch of white people on stage when there's nothing you can do to fix it at this point in the presidential race. That wasn't the only blunder for Democrats. For example, Michael Bloomberg, he blundered big time when he almost slipped and said that he, quote, bought the Democratic House in the last midterm elections. Take a look at this from the CBS debate.
Mayor Bloomberg, please.
Let's just go on the record. They talked about 40 Democrats. 21 of those were people that I spent $100 million to help elect. All of the new Democrats that came in and put Nancy Pelosi in charge and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them. Number 2, when you talk about money, just put this in perspective.
So what Bloomberg was flat out saying is that the liberals in the House were bought and paid for by him. So that means that all of these people who claim the president and conservatives are controlled by big donors are 100% hypocrites. They are paid for and controlled, apparently, by Michael Bloomberg. He wasn't the only one who tried to take all credit for all things that were even, well, pretty ridiculous to claim. For example, Joe Biden was on a roll during the debate when he tried to take credit for writing basically every single bill that was ever written for everything former President Barack Obama ever did. And even took credit for saving, quote, millions of lives from the Ebola virus. Obviously interesting timing since we're talking about the coronavirus now. Take a look at, I guess you could call him superhero, Joe Biden during the CBS debate.
What we did with Ebola, I was part of making sure that pandemic did not get to the United States, saved millions of lives. And what we did, I helped set up that office in the presidency, in the president's office on diseases that are pandemic diseases. We increased the budget of the CDC. We increased the NIH budget.
That's right. Joe Biden just took credit for supposedly saving millions of lives from the Ebola virus. You want to know what pandering looks like? Well, this is what pandering looks like, especially when we're now dealing with the coronavirus and superhero Joe Biden's trying to tell you that if you elect him, somehow he'll save all of us. Now, Biden also said some things that were impossible to be true. And what was even more scary is the fact that not a single person on stage called him out for flat-out lies. Also, not a single one of the moderators of the debate called him out. Perfect example is when Biden made up a statistic and he said that 150 million people have died from gun violence since 2007. Now, you would think someone would have jumped on that and said, that's impossible. No one did. Now, let me make this clear. What it would mean if 150 million people were killed, it means that half of the population of the United States of America would have died from gun violence since 2007. Here is his own words from the debate.
But my friend to my right and others have, in fact, also given to the gun manufacturers absolute immunity. Imagine if I stood here and said we give immunity to drug companies, we give immunity to tobacco companies. That has caused carnage on our streets. 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability.
Now, again, what's so crazy about this moment is not one single candidate had the guts to call him out for this insane lie. I guess it's okay to lie as long as it's taking away people's guns if you're a Democratic candidate. Let's move on to something else that should have caught everyone's attention. The top candidates also for the Democratic Party continued to go against our greatest ally, Israel. Perfect example is Elizabeth Warren, with her back and forth with the moderators as she refused to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Take a look at this from the CBS debate.
Just on the question of the embassy, what was your position?
It is not ours to do.
Would you move it back?
It is not ours to do. We should let the parties determine the capitals.
Would you move it back? Our embassy.
We should let the parties determine the capitals themselves.
So to recap, this is the Socialist Democratic Party, and these are the only people they have to offer. Can you imagine if a single one of them ended up in the White House? Now, this is just a small taste of the painful 2-hour debate, and it should be enough to encourage all of us to head directly to the polls and vote this November. This week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released a warning for all Americans regarding the coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus has now spread throughout China and more than 30 other countries and territories, including the United States. We even saw our first American military member come down with the virus in South Korea. Now, because of this, the CDC officially said this week that Americans should prepare for the spread of the coronavirus in communities across the country. Dr. Nancy Messonnier is the head of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC. She said that it's no longer a question of if this will spread in the United States. It's now a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people it will affect. Watch this report from ABC News.
We are asking the American public to work with us to prepare in the expectation that this could be bad.
In their most clear warning yet, the CDC all but promises that the coronavirus will spread here and that Americans need to prepare.
We expect we will see community spread in this country. It's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will have severe illness. We really want to prepare the American public for the possibility that their lives will be disrupted because of this pandemic.
That's right. It's no longer about if, it's about when. What was even more shocking is the fact that liberals would rather politicize this horrible disease than fight it so they can blame Donald Trump for any issues that may come from the spread of the coronavirus. Democrats clearly have come together to attack Trump for not stopping the coronavirus already. I don't know how you can hold him responsible for this disease, but I'll show you, for example, how Senator Chuck Schumer made sure to politicize the coronavirus to attack the president from the Senate floor, making a statement about how much the president has supposedly already failed on the coronavirus. Take a look at this.
All of the warning lights are flashing bright red. We are staring down a potential pandemic, and the administration has no plan. We have a crisis of coronavirus, and President Trump has no plan, no urgency, no understanding of the facts or how to coordinate a response. We must get a handle on the coronavirus and make sure the United States is fully prepared to deal with its potentially far-reaching consequences.
Now, what's so disingenuous and disgusting about what Schumer says, or what he claims, as he says the president has no plan. There's a big problem with that statement. He said this after Donald Trump had already established and launched his official coronavirus task force led by Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar. Now, the president launched this a month ago, and this week he asked Congress for $2.5 billion for coronavirus funding. Now, this is a bipartisan issue, and it's even more clear when you see liberal senators like Maggie Hassan saying it's, quote, absolutely critical that Congress support the president's request. Take a look at this from Fox News.
Let's go on to the coronavirus. We did have an all-Senate briefing this morning. We've had multiple briefings. It is good to see the administration come forward with a request for some additional funds to help us get prepared for the coronavirus here at home. But most of us think there's a lot more to do. And this is not a partisan issue, obviously. Our job is to protect American lives, their liberty and property, too. But right now, with this virus spreading, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to contain the virus, but also be prepared for the additional spread, because we're beginning to see some evidence, for instance, in Italy and Iran, that this may be spreading through communities. And we need to be prepared for that, and I think we all believe that there needs to be more resources devoted to that.
Are you likely to support what the president is pushing for? You said you want to help with resources. It's not political. He wants about $2.5 billion from the Congress to deal with this.
Oh, sure. I support that request. I think it's absolutely critical that we support that and then look at more of the resources that we will need.
Now, to be clear, I want to praise what you just saw, a liberal supporting a proposal by the president and calling it absolutely critical so that we can protect Americans from coronavirus. This is absolutely critical for this country, and liberals in Congress should be ashamed of themselves, at least those who are politicizing a national health crisis for political gain at the polls. Yet, here we are again, watching them do exactly that. American lives are at risk here, which means it's time to put down your party's flag and work together to protect everyone. We here at AMAC want to make sure that you are up to date on the latest information about the coronavirus and how you can prepare and protect your family. One of the great places you can go to get more information is the CDC's website at cdc.gov. That's cdc.gov. And finally, for Democrats tagging the president, claiming that he has no plan on how to fight back or deal with coronavirus, I just want you to see what the president had to say Wednesday evening from the White House as he appointed a coronavirus czar.
I'm going to be announcing exactly right now that I'm going to be putting our Vice President, Mike Pence, in charge. And Mike will be working with the professionals, doctors, and everybody else that's working. The team is brilliant. I spent a lot of time with the team over the last couple of weeks, but they're totally brilliant, and we're doing really well. And Mike is going to be in charge, and Mike will report back to me. But he's got a certain talent for this, and I'm going to ask Mike Pence to say a few words, please. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Trump's made clear from the first days of this administration we have no higher priority than the safety, security, health, and well-being of the American people. And from the first word of an outbreak of the coronavirus, the President took unprecedented steps to protect the American people from the spread of this disease. He recounted those briefly, but the establishment of travel restrictions aggressive quarantine effort of Americans that are returning, a declaration of a public health emergency, and establishing the White House Corona Task Force are all reflective of the urgency that the President has brought to a whole-of-government approach. As a former governor from the state where the first MERS case emerged in 2014, I know full well the importance of presidential leadership, the importance of administration leadership, and the vital role of partnerships of state and local governments and health authorities in responding to the potential threat of dangerous infectious diseases. And I look forward, Mr. President, to serving in this role and bringing together all the members of the Corona Task Force that you've established, HHS, CDC, DHS, the Department of Transportation, and State. This team has been, at your direction, Mr. President, meeting every day since it was established. My role will be to continue to bring that team together, to bring to the President the best options for action to see to the safety and well-being and health of the American people.
That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. Quick reminder, if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, do it now so you can continue to receive the show and access to our incredible member benefits. You also get the AMAC magazine, but most importantly, AMAC represents you and more than 2 million other conservatives on Capitol Hill every day. So make sure you renew or join right now. I'm Ben Ferguson, and I'll see you back next week for our next episode.